So on the 19th of August, Boreham Wood released an article on their website which basically contained a conversation between the chairman, Danny Hunter, and the club shop and away travel manager, Morris. It basically detailed the chairman's frustrations about the lack of fans coming through the turnstiles. And the reception of it has certainly been pretty much that it's just a very strange article to put out, but regardless, it's very interesting, and it does give a bit of a perspective that a lot of people may not understand, and it opens up an entire wider debate of, can football clubs buy fans? Can football clubs convince people to come and watch them play based on money? There's a few different ways you can use money in football. The most obvious one is to decrease the admission prices to get people through the gates, also by spending loads of money on improving your ground, spending loads of money on improving the quality of your squad. There's different ways that football clubs can use money. Do any of these methods work in terms of sustainably increasing the attendances and actually getting more people through the gates? We're going to be delving into this whole debate and looking into the situation at Boreham Wood. There's loads of different other clubs who've tried different ways of increasing the gates. Some have failed, some have succeeded. We'll be looking at it all in this video. First of all, this video is sponsored by OneFootball, which is a great way to stay up to date with loads of different information from different matches across the footballing world, be it in non-league in the National League or up into the Football League and the Premier League. There's lots of different ways that you can use the OneFootball app to stay up to date with lots of information, which is why it is an app that I do recommend. It's got an average rating of 4.7 and 4.8 on Apple and Android, so there's a lot of people that do like the app, with over 1 million people voting for their rating on Android in particular. If you haven't downloaded it already, the link to download it will be in the top line of the description. Anyway, the article released by Boreham Wood followed a match that they had at home to Sutton United, where only 407 supporters turned up to that match, of which 130 of those were away fans, 287 home fans in the ground, and that included just 46 adults and OAPs that were paying on the gate. That is a very, very, very low number for the National League. It's very unsustainable, and if they were to get into the Football League where they have to have financial fair play, which is basically gauging the money coming into the club versus the money going out of the club, virtually no money is coming into that club through gate receipts, because you're getting 46 people paying on the gate. That's taking out your season ticket holders and whatever, and that's pretty much what this article was all about. It started off by Morris asking Hunter about what he thought of the game, of which he gave a little bit of an explanation of what he thought, but he said the bigger issue that he's got to worry about is the number of fans coming through the gates. After this point, there was almost an aggressive kind of tone to the article. Morris then conveyed the idea of potentially the low attendance being because it's the school holidays and people are away, maybe because other clubs are taking the floating supporters, which are effectively just fans that are not really fans of any particular club, they just go around different clubs. He's essentially saying that are the other clubs around them getting those floating supporters. But Hunter, in response to this, was really not happy about it and basically says, look, we can't make any more excuses. He says that we've been finding excuses at whatever league we've been playing in, and there aren't any excuses left. If you look at the averages, we're over 500 supporters less than the next worst supported club in the National League. That average currently sits at 625 for the current season so far. That's over 500 less than the 1,137 people that have been on average going to home games at Ebbsfleet United. That's the second lowest supporters club in the National League, and the overall average of the entire National League is around about 2,200. If you work it out, Boreham Wood are getting around 28% of the average. If you track this back to the previous season since they've entered the National League during the 15-16 season, their attendance that season was 577 on average, and that season they finished in 19th place in the league. The second season was the 16-17 season. They finished 11th and had 477 people through, so exactly 100 people less that season, despite finishing 8 positions higher. The next season was the season they finished in 4th and got to the National League playoff final. They had 1,304 people in their ground at each game that season, which is very respectable. Last season, they dropped right down, almost half of the previous season's average attendance, down to 717. That was partly probably because they finished down in 20th position. To lose half of your fan base based off whether you've had a good season or a bad season is very, very concerning. And that would suggest suggests that during that season where they finished 4th, they did have a lot of those floating supporters coming into their ground because they were doing well. They've not been able to retain these supporters and keep them coming week in, week out, unfortunately. And this is part of what Hunter's obviously been very frustrated at. He continued with this conversation and said, the truth is, other than the bigger games against the big clubs who carry large away support, we are, after 5 years at National League level, clearly no bigger than a Ryman League or Southern League club. Today's abysmal crowd just makes me feel sad, as so much hard work goes into making this club overachieve every year, and we just want a bit more support for those efforts. 407 as a gate attendance at our level is laughable. I can't keep spending on ground improvements and increased first team and staffing levels if nobody wants to come and watch us. I can't keep wasting my money if the apathy of a town continues and it won't support a club to compete at National League level. They even got to a playoff final at Wembley. That's a fantastic achievement, and despite the fans that they took there that day, they've not stayed and actually supported the club through thick and thin, because the last season was nowhere near as good as the playoff season. There's not that many people supporting them despite a new stand opening prior to the current season. Behind the one goal, they have built an entire new stand. It's a fantastic terrace that really does improve the quality of the ground and gives the fans a covered terracing option they didn't have before. Now, as an outsider looking in, you could just see this as Hunter just bankrolling a team, trying to just have a bit of fun and get them through the leagues. But to be fair to him, that's not really the case, because he's been at the club now for 21 years as chairman, which is a very long time. That's longer than I've been alive. So he's not in this for the short term. He's been in it the long term. He's seen them rise up through 4 leagues since 2004, and he says that he's increased the playing budget in that time by more than 800%. He's built 2 brand new stands, built a new pitch, added a sprinkler system, replaced the old floodlights, built 6 new changing rooms, twice rebuilt new Astro pitch training facilities. But for some reason, the attendances just aren't increasing. So why is that? Let's look at some different options. Option number 1, probably the most obvious one, are the ticket prices. Boreham Wood currently charge £18 if you pre-book your tickets, and that's to go in any part of the stadium. £18 for National League level is right up there with some of the most expensive, and if you pay on the day, you have to pay a £2 extra as an adult, so it's actually £20 to get in as an adult to get into a Boreham Wood match. Notts County and FC Halifax Town are the 2 most expensive. Their cheapest tickets cost £20, so effectively if you just go in there on the day, Boreham Wood is exactly the same price as that. And the difference between Boreham Wood and Halifax and Notts County is that Halifax and Notts County are established clubs with big stadiums and large fan bases that have been supporting the club through generations. Those 2 clubs have got people that have their dads take their kids along to games and repeat that through generation after generation, and it becomes a real important part of their family's tradition, and that's what really helps set aside the historic non-league clubs from the new ones that are trying to push their way through. These new clubs just don't have that, and as a result, people are less likely to want to go and spend that extra amount of money to go and watch their team. Halifax and Notts County, if you're a fan that's been going for your whole life, your dad went for his whole life, your granddad's been going for his whole life, you're more likely to spend that little bit extra, aren't you, if you think about it like that way. Whereas Boreham Wood, if they're trying to attract new fans, if you see that £20 to go and pay on the day, that's a lot of money to just go into your back pocket and spend on a club that you're not really that emotionally attached to. Additionally, Halifax and Notts County have a lot of people going to their games anyway, so you know there's going to be a good atmosphere at those games, whereas Boreham Wood, because you know that there's not going to be many people there, if you want to go and experience a great atmosphere, then you might think twice about going to Boreham Wood, because there's going to be so few people in the actual ground creating an atmosphere. And that just creates a negative feedback loop of not wanting to go to a ground because there's no atmosphere, which then means there's less people going, so it creates even less of an atmosphere, so effectively it just makes the whole situation worse. Some clubs have tried some different ticketing strategies to try and get fans in by decreasing their prices. The likes of Bradford Park Avenue this season have put a great offer on where they charge just £100 for a season ticket. But unfortunately, they've now had to cut their budget this season, whether that's caused by the cheap season tickets or not. They've had to cut their budget, so making it less of an attractive place to go and watch your football, and they currently sit down in the relegation zone in the National League North. And so far this season, their average attendances have been just 429 compared to last season's 525 average attendances, and last season they finished 7th in the league. So that plan so far has backfired a little bit. The second factor is the PR element. This statement has been received relatively negatively, or just in a kind of people taking the mick out of Boreham Wood on social media for this. I get that their chairman is frustrated, but by conveying this frustration, I just can't help but feel like this can just alienate people who are potentially thinking of going to Boreham Wood and really make them not really have an appetite to go to matches. Also, looking at PR, you can look at the likes of Salford City, who have grown hugely both online and in terms of a football club on the pitch as well. They've grown through the leagues, they've increased in their size, their fan base. They've gone from having average attendances prior to the class of 92 being there of just 139 during the 13-14 season. That was in the 8th tier, but now they're in the Football League and have average attendances this season of 3,446. That is huge, and it's not been just a rise from one season to the next of just a massive increase. They have obviously risen through the leagues each season and they've progressed really quickly, but their attendances have gradually risen and risen and risen. Now, if they were to now drop back down into the National League, for example, would their attendances stay the same? They'd probably drop a little bit, but they are using the PR from the Salford City Class of 92 involvement to basically propel themselves. Not every football club's going to have that ability to use such fame to their advantage. The third reason is one that I did speak about a minute ago, and that is about the history of the club, about generation after generation going to matches. If you look at Stockport County, for example, when they got relegated down to the National League North for the 13-14 season, they started off with attendances of 2,500, which is still unbelievable for that level at that time. As the seasons progressed, as they got stuck, 6 years they were stuck down there, their attendances every season increased, to the point where last season they had average attendances of over 4,000. That's testament to the loyalty of that fan base and how big of a club they are. Boreham Wood, if they were to do the same as that, that wouldn't happen because they don't have that ingrained nature of parents and children coming to the games together for the last few generations. Well, they will have it to an extent, but not as many people doing that as the likes of Stockport do. And that's the difference between the big clubs and the small clubs. It's a long-term thing, and Boreham Wood need to stick at it really. They need to keep going and keep sustaining themselves at that National League level for as long as they can. Slowly, I think the attendances will rise. Will they ever get to the high levels of what Stockport are at, for example? Probably not, because they're going to have to go for another 100 years of being at that level to get to that point. The fourth and final point that I'm going to make is because of the other clubs around them. They're in that sort of London conurbation sort of area. They've got so many clubs around them that other fans could go and watch. You've got Barnet just a couple of miles down the road. You've got Watford, who have been growing and growing each season to become an established Premier League club. They're just 5 miles down the road. And then obviously just being on the corner of London, you've got so many clubs right across London. So the small things could make all the difference if Boreham Wood is not seen as the best option, i.e. they're seeing statements online from a chairman of the club that they think is a bit like alienating fans that aren't going to watch games when, for example, if they can't afford to go and watch Boreham Wood and they can only afford to go and watch a team that they can pay £10 a week at, then they're going to feel a bit alienated and think, well, I don't really want to go and spend that extra amount of money to go and watch Boreham Wood now. In conclusion, it is always going to be difficult for a club to grow and gain new fans. Quite simply, I think it just comes down to whether you are a big club historically or you're not. Bandwagon fans are always going to jump on teams that are doing quite well, but if you then don't sustain that real quality of progress, then they will just jump off and go and find a new team to watch, most likely. But yeah, let me know your thoughts on this whole debate in the comment section down below. Be interested to see what your thoughts are on this, because it is quite an interesting one. If you enjoyed this video, remember to hit that like button and click subscribe as well. I hope to see you in the next video, and thanks for watching.